All right, folks, we are ready to do this. This has been quite a while. We've had a couple of webinars for different features that we've released and improving your workflow over the last several months, but this is a staple webinar series that we do with one of our favorite consultants, Julia Nikishna. So, Julia, it's been quite a while since you and I have teamed up for a webinar, but it's good to be working with you again. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, thank you. How are you? I know, I missed you.
Everything's been going really, really well. But today specifically, as part of our webinar program in general, we are going to be talking about a time of year that I'm sure most maybe have a little shudder as it gets nearer and nearer, and that's the end of the year, where we're filing taxes and all of the things that encompass that. I couldn't even begin to list all of them. Julia, that is your expertise. But today we're going to be understanding financial statements, which is humongous. I think that's a great jumping off point for our webinar series on year-end preparation, and making sure that we're ready to go and everything falls into place and moves along smoothly. So what every designer needs to know about financial statements and understanding how to use them, what they are, what they tell us, that's what we're going to be learning today. For those of you who are new, Julia and I are a dynamic duo, but Julia on her own has her own company, New Age Financial Consulting. So they provide bookkeeping and accounting support, including CFO services for large and small businesses. They specialize in unique and complex accounting needs of interior design firms and showrooms like yours. And they also have a comprehensive procurement or offer comprehensive procurement services for designers and showrooms. I have never been able to get through that once without stumbling, like literally reading off of a screen. So that, if that's any indication on how this webinar is going to go, we might be in for a bumpy ride. But with all that being said, one last house cleaning item that I want to go over with everyone here. This is partially Q&A outside of the content that Julie is going to bring today. So we want to capture your questions and make sure that we answer those as they come in, either towards the end or if Julia can, have question or answer sprinkled in amongst her content. But to submit questions, more importantly, that QA button in your Zoom toolbar, click QA. It might be a question mark and a box now. I think Zoom did some cool updates with their user interface, but click the QA button, type your question in the window that pops up, and we will get to it live during the webinar. With that being said, Julia, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to do your thing.
Perfect. Just make sure you see the right screen, as that's a terrifying fear of mine.
Absolutely. Was I showing my screen? Because I don't think I verified.
You are showing your screen.
Good, 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 good.
Can we see studio?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So thank you. Yes, Anthony and I are host webinars, I would say often, and he'll actually be at the user conference with us in February for anyone who's interested. Anthony, I'm going to ask a question that so many people ask me, and actually Mary has already asked about the recording. So I know it's recorded, but will they, if they signed up ahead of time, will they also get an email saying, here's the link to the recorded webinar, or do they have to go search for it in the Learning Hub?
No, we would not make our designers do something silly like that. We will, and it's actually partially mine. I will, to give you guys the nitty-gritty, I will upload this to our Learning Hub, and that link will then be emailed to everybody that registered, not attended. Anybody who registered, I want to make that clear. So if you weren't able to make it today, or you had somebody that's on your team that couldn't make it today, it will automatically be emailed to everybody that registered for this webinar, whether you attended or not. It'll have the direct link
Okay,
and
perfect.
it'll take you right there.
I know clients ask us that a lot as well.
I get that
Um,
a lot too, oddly enough.
So for today, we're going to dive into financial statements. It's obviously a really, what I would say is a broad topic. It is getting close to the end of the year, right? I mean, really, we're in Q4, it'll be over before we know it. And there's a lot of granular level of detail that could go into the financial statements and what it means in terms of, are they in a good place? Are they not? We're going to try to cover as much as we can today. I am a big fan of Q&A. And so if you have a question, I'm going to try to respond to everything in real time, especially if it's applicable to a screen we're in or a report we're in. So much easier to respond than trying to go back and recreate something for you. So just put that into the Q&A box. I do see them in real time, and I'll get back to you as soon as I see it pop through. So obviously financial statements are starting under our report tab. So here's our report tab on the left. I'm an old Studio Designer user, so I actually live in my legacy reports. I don't typically go to the financial forms. I do believe they're one and the same, but just out of habit. Legacy is always where I go and where I start. So your two main financial reports are your balance sheet and your income statement. For those of you new to Studio, or just as a nice refresher, please remember Studio Designer is accrual-based accounting only. There is no cash option. That has been the way the software was set up way back by Lance, who was the original developer. He believed very strongly that our industry should not have a cash option. We have a lot of money tied up in work in progress, and we have a lot of money so in deferred revenue and in retainers. So everything coming out of Studio is on an accrual basis. If you're not an accrual-based filer and you're a cash filer on your tax return, that is a bigger conversation to be had with whoever your tax preparer is. And if you don't know those answers, that is completely okay. But I would recommend that you reach out to someone and ask, hey, by the way, am I a cash or an accrual filer? It's also on your tax return. So if you're an S Corp filer, there's a little box that says cash or accrual. The LLC will flow through to your 1040. That'll be indicated on there as well. And a partnership, I would say those are the main three. It'll also indicate that. So just keep that in mind as we're going through some of this information. So let's actually start with the income statement, because I find easier to explain than the balance sheet. So what is an income statement? So an income statement shows revenue, cost of goods sold, and expenses. Please keep in mind, this is a test database. It is super fun, but because it is a test database, it can have very interesting financials. So I've said this to Anthony many times before. I never like to look at zeros. They drive me crazy. I always toggle this off. I actually wish it could be a preset under company settings. I have put that requested myself many times. So you'll always see me turn include zero to no, because I don't want to see them. I just find that it muddies the information. If I'm looking to understand where I'm at for this year, I'm going to change my period from and my period to obviously include January to today, October. And this year is 2024. If I click on PDF, what is it going to show me? So remember, Studio comes, the chart of accounts, actually, let's actually go to them. So the chart of accounts is preset. Chart of accounts are actually, I mean, I think they're pretty good. I mean, the way they're set with an original Studio database is pretty encompassing. I would say a lot of firms definitely make changes and alterations, but it is relatively, it is giving you good data to start off with. Also, remember, these reference numbers, they're really according to GAAP principles. So everyone asks, or many people ask often, do you need a reference number? So do you need one? No. Should you have one? Yes, absolutely. And if you notice your chart of accounts, the reference numbers associated here display the information associated on your income statement and balance sheet. So for example, income reimbursable was account 4,000, it would populate above sales income on this report. But the way Studio sets up the chart of accounts is logical, and they're trying to group revenue for you. They're trying to group revenue for you. That's not a question, that's a statement. So your first half, or your first section of your income statement, says income sales. If you're utilizing Studio correctly and accurately, everything associated with this bucket of accounts is related to your items. So anything that says sales income, sales antique, sales furniture, sales fabric, those are driven by, I actually should have opened up your sales code. Sales codes, let's actually do that too. Those are driven by your sales codes, and your sales codes, you should only be using sales codes in your item screen. So your sales codes are related to, well, I always say product, but even though this isn't necessarily only product, right? It could be labor, but it's FF&E related. So this section up here is FF&E related. It's coming from your sales codes, which are here, and the test database has a lot of additional sales codes. Let's assume that they're all super great. So if you go to antiques as an example, right, it's getting mapped to sales antiques, and cost of sales is down here. So if you continued the mapping system as Studio designed it, this is always related to items. Your next section is called income time billing. Again, if you've kept those accounts consistent, this will always be related to time billing. What does that mean? So remember, you have a time billing module right here. So you could have, so time billing is tied to activities. Activities are tied to sales codes. If you notice on our fake income statement, we have not only income time billing, we have income architecture, and we have income flat fees. We decided to separate out flat fees versus hourly versus architecture. But all of these, all three of these are still related to everything having to do with charging for time. So on a very quick glance, and this is the goal of the income statement, you want to see, well, how much did I sell in product or anything related to FF&E? Because remember, I'm calling it product, but you also have labor. So, but how much did I sell in items? What did I make in income time billing? And what was sort of my, I was going to say bullshit, but so the miscellaneous items, right? So this is where reimbursables would go. We have a random $100. Some firms definitely have a lot of reimbursables, but I don't want I don't need my reimbursable total in with my income time billing. I don't want that. I really want them to be separate. So very quickly I could understand where am I in the three buckets in terms of revenue. I also very quickly, just for math, am looking at income sales up here, which is $1,094,000. And then again, if I'm utilizing the program correctly, my total cost of sales, remember, this is driven by your sales code. Your sales codes are set up correctly. Your cost of sales furniture should be in relation to your sales furniture, right? So where are you in terms of margin? I have something really goofy in income other. I don't know what it is. If I wanted to find out, I would go to my general ledger and look it up. You could do that in the accounting tab. You could also do that in the general ledger report tab. But I want to very quickly, when pulling the income statement, say, okay, well, what is my markup and or what is my margin? Am I doing a good job when it comes to marking up product, or am I not? And so that's one of the, I think, one of the bigger reasons of why it's so important to make sure that income time billing is separate and apart from anything having to do with product, and again, separate and apart from anything having to do with reimbursables. So our markup here looks amazing, but I have something, I have 700,000 in income other. I mean, we could go see what it is. That would be, if you're doing this for yourself and you see that, I mean, your next step should be, oh, shoot, let's go investigate. So I went to accounting, I went to general ledger. I'm going to put in other for income other, and I'm going to filter by the date range of this year. Oh, golly. So I'm sure in March on a webinar, I moved money from client deposit. I'm almost positive this was related to First Dibs because something was incorrectly posted in First Dibs. It went into a client deposit account, but as we know, First Dibs shouldn't have a client deposit account. So I had to get rid of it, and I had to pick it up as income because First Dibs refunded us in our fake land months before that. So hopefully you don't have a discrepancy like that, but this will be, again, a really great and easy way for you
I just
to catch that.
say, Julia, that I can't take responsibility for the mismanagement of all of this income for
It's
this.
funny, this was me, right? Because I could tell by my initials and I remember, but I'm now, I'd be curious to know why, yes, why it wound up tied to, I'm remembering First Dibs, but why a vendor was tied to client deposit in the first place. But I will say that happens, right? Like that happens. I mean, we see that often. So somebody's asking that they don't have access to legacy reports. So I believe that actually would be a great Anthony question. I believe that has to do with your user. So if you're not an enterprise user, you're only going to be able to see financial reports. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Essentials, they have a limited number of reports. Legacy, I believe, is available for enterprise and premier users. So if you'd like to upgrade your tier, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help you out with that. Yeah, let us know.
That's a great question. I'm an old time studio user. I mean, I love, there are a lot of reports for sure in studio. I actually think that's one of the benefits. Can they be overwhelming? Yes. And there's a select few, sort of like top 5, top 10. I know we've done webinars on them in terms of like fan favorites, but there's a lot of value that could come from the extended reports.
Absolutely.
You'll be able to find, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Anthony.
No, no, no. I was totally agreeing with you. As your businesses grow, and you want to, look into um, deeper detail, more nuance of what's going on in your business, especially with project or with work in progress reports. That's a big one. But
Yes.
yeah, the extensive reporting becomes extremely valuable as we move along.
Someone else is asking what's the difference between regular and legacy. So I don't know what you mean by regular, right? Regular is not a tab. If you could expand on.
Probably the standard reports are what they're, yeah, those ones
Oh,
there. So
so,
they're
oh,
similar and to my recollection. It's just the as far as like the data, but it's like the layout is what really is different.
well, and so standard reports though won't have any of the financial reports. So to find financial reports, you would need to go either to legacy or to the financial forms up here on the right. If I'm understanding the question correctly. Someone else is asking that there was maybe I just $5,000 in my income and I can't figure out where it came from. I'm sorry, if that person can expand, uh, 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 I'm not sure what a transcrepancy is. I don't know if we mean that something was just misposted or miscategorized, but I could certainly try to help. Okay, so if we're back to our income statement, we're showing that we have phenomenal margins based on $700,000 of other income. But again, this is the goal of reviewing this to understand if you have any discrepancies. And then your next section of administrative expenses, just please remember, and I know I said this earlier and I say it often. Oh, look, commissions is misposted. The information in here is only as good as your data. So if you have something posted to freight as an expense in administrative expenses or postage, let's actually use postage as a real example. If you have something posted to postage, but it really should go onto a purchase order, your administrative expenses aren't going to be correct, right? So the system isn't going to stop you from posting things incorrectly. It really is assuming that you're reviewing the data in your ledger to ensure that this then financial statement is correct. I could see very quickly that something is incorrect right here, right? So commission is an expense and there's a negative $73,000. This, I'm assuming, should be a credit to commission income. But if I want to have a better understanding, I would do the same thing. I would go to accounting, I'd go to general ledger. I would pull up commission. And I'd look to see what is happening. So look, here's our friends First Dibs. First Dibs sent us a payment of $72,500 and it was posted incorrectly to commission on the expense side instead of some sort of income account. I could actually change it directly in this screen. So if you go to this little pencil button, you go to edit, your next screen allows you to see what account it's posted to. You could then click down on commission and see that it actually, and you could see this, right? This is filtered or displayed by how your chart of accounts looks like. So business gifts is an administrative expense. Commission is an administrative expense. So these are lumped together. So you would want to scroll up until you were in your revenue section. And then in here, you would say, How would I like to see commission? Do I want to create a new income account for it? Do I want to just throw it in income other or income miscellaneous? We have 2 income miscellaneouses in here. Where is our $700,000 friend? That's an income other. I mean, we could be consistent and throw it in income other. But I want to get it out of my administrative expenses, right? Because it's skewing my totals. So you can't hit save, it won't do anything, but you must hit change account now. And then it'll actually change your GL account, then hit save. I just don't, I mean, I hit save usually 12 times in places, and then I hit back. And so now if you go back to double check your work, we're in commission as the GL. If you notice that particular line item is gone. I'm going to assume this 1,000 bulbs as a cash receipt is also incorrect, right? Because administrative expenses should be debits. This is a credit, so this should be revenue. And this actually tells me, right, it's commission on referrals. So I want it out of my administrative expenses. I do the same thing. I click on my pencil. I'm in here. I'm going to put an income other. I'm going to change. I'm going to hit save and I'm going to go to back. So someone is saying that they practiced creating this report, however, everything was 0. Why is that? So I'm assuming that means you could have a filter problem. So actually, let's keep this report open because we want to see what happened with our administrative expenses. So if you notice in your report builder, go to legacy, go to income statement, it will default to just October. So if you haven't invoiced anything, I don't know what's happening in here in October. Look, I didn't do my pet peeve of include 0 now. If you haven't invoiced anything or if you haven't imported any administrative expenses, this will be all 0. So change your time frame from October and October to reflect the whole year, January to October. Include 0, yes or no. I'm including 0, no, and then I'm going back to my PDF. And so I made those couple of general ledger changes. And so now income other went up to 782. My old one was 709. I'm going to leave that in my other screen. And now I'm scrolling down to my administrative expenses down here. So now I have very little administrative expenses for a company that generates quite a bit of revenue. So go me. But this is where you would then begin to review. Okay, where am I with salaries? Where am I with auto expenses? Why did I spend too much on meals and entertainment? Why are my travel costs extravagant? What am I doing with repairs, etc., office supplies? So this would be the area for you to concentrate on to understand expenses having to do with the studio or the office, depending on obviously how you classify yourself. These expenses down here, the way I explain it, they should never be related to a client. Because if you have a client related expense, let's use flowers. Actually, this is a common one. Let's use flowers or a client gift, or you bought a beautiful arrangement, or you bought a beautiful candle or something for a client. I would always prefer you enter that particular item physically as an item, meaning in your item screen. And you're entering, so my fake client is, are we 19th Street? I haven't been in here in a while. Yes, and so 19th Street is Mr. and Mrs. Tom Hanks. They're actually a pleasure to work with because they have almost $1 million in client deposit. So this is my test client. There's a couple of us in this database, Anthony being one of them. So we all usually designate a client to work on. If I'm buying something for this client and I'm not charging them, samples, flowers, gifts, I covered damages, anything at all like that, I always prefer the recommendation to be you enter that item. This is probably why everything tied to me is related to first dibs. I prefer you enter that item as non-billable. So that way that expense is linked to the client. It's linked to the project, the room, and we're able to see how it reflects the profitability of the project. Because if flowers for photo shoot. And some of this is judgment for sure. If you're in the middle of an AD photo shoot and there's a lot of expenses, do you want to link them to that particular project? Maybe at that point in time you would, and I would say just, it really depends. But if there's some one-offs and you're giving some things to the client, I want everything in here in the purchase cost and the selling cost to be zero. So that way we're not overinflating what I would call our administrative expenses. So somebody asked, how do you enter those expenses? I think that's a great question. I think we should focus on financial statements today. I know that there's definitely learning hub webinars on how to capture administrative expenses. You would be capturing everything for administrative expenses under accounting and money out. So that would be a great place to start. And if you go to the Learning Hub and put in money out, or administrative expenses, I'm sure that there's definitely webinars that can help.
Absolutely.
So there's a question about project profitability. How can we make sure that only items that a client has actually purchased show up on those? I think mine is still showing items that are on proposal, but haven't been necessarily been purchased yet by the client or by us. So it's actually a really great question. And project profitability, that worksheet, for me is a big favorite. So we could just look at it very, very quickly. So there's two of these at the top that I love. I typically go to the second one. If you ask me specifically why, I think really just layout related. But if I go to 19th Street, which is my test client, as a default, this report doesn't show me, for example, proposals or client payments, but I could always add that. So if I wanted the project worksheet profit report to only show me items that are paid for, I could alter the filters on this report. So go to edit report, go to specify data. You could do a couple different things. You could do client total. You could add in a client total balance. I would prefer to see this towards the top. Whoops, come on. Whoops. Hold on. Client total balance, I need you to scooch. So client total, and actually that's too long for me, and we're gonna make a total. So if I run it this way, I could then, so if I go back to 19th Street, I could then see, okay, well, studio and 19th Street, show me any item where this client total balance, for example, is zero. I could also filter, or I could add in the actual payment so I could see that as well. Or you could also do the same thing and add a proposal number. So it depends on how you manage, I would say, like workflow or workload. Are you using proposals as an indicator that the item is ready to go to the client, or are you only putting items on proposals once the item is complete? I think actually I said the same thing in just two different ways. So if an item is in studio, but it's not on a proposal, does that mean the team is working at pricing? If that's the case, you could run this report and say to studio, only show me items on a proposal. So if you wanted to add proposal into this particular report, go to edit, go to specify. This toolbox up here is incredibly helpful instead of trying to open up each one of these subcategories to find your right field. And so I would just put in proposal number, right? And so I don't want it at the bottom because that's where my margins are. I'm going to throw it at the top, though. I don't know why it's like not liking this. So those would be just some easy ways and some great ways to understand. Okay. To understand profit on current items. But that's I would say that's a really, really great question. Again, this is for me one of my all-time favorite reports. So if I go back to 19th Street, 19th Street probably has a bunch of random stuff. Yeah, so like, what is this stuff? Who knows? Why is this in here? I don't know. So like I could exclude all of the items that I know are not correct. So I would say proposal is not blank. So I'm in my custom report. I now need to add a filter, forms, proposal number, and I would say proposal is not blank. And now it would show me any item on a proposal. Now, granted, some of it may be paid, some of it may not be paid. And then down here, I'm going to see my profit. I'm going to see if the client has balances. I'm going to see the total selling. So this would be a really great first step. Okay, let's actually just move on to our balance sheet, because I know somebody has a question about some, looks like client deposit questions. So that would be a great next step. So your two main financial reports, just to recap, right? If you go into reports and you go to legacy, your income statement is income, cost of goods, and expenses, and then your balance sheet is next. I find the balance sheet to be a lot trickier than the income statement. It's definitely not as straightforward. I would also recommend it include zero no. So if I go to include zero now remember again, test database, there's some interesting things that are on here, and some of these are old, which is interesting. So here's my balance sheet. I ran it for a period of time. Remember, your balance sheet is different than your income statement. When we looked at our income statement, we picked period from and period to. Your balance sheet doesn't work that way. So your balance sheet compounds. It compounds day after day, month after month, year after year. Your balance sheet never resets. It's one of the biggest differences between an income statement and a balance sheet. Your balance sheet is always ongoing, and your income statement resets, right? It resets most likely in January. When you're wrapping up a calendar, and then a tax year, and then in January everything goes to zero, but your balance sheet is never zero. So that is just something different, something to keep in mind. And so when you're in your balance sheet filters, that's why you're only pulling by one period instead of two. So these balances are ongoing. So again, at the top, according to GAAP principles, but Studio follows those principles, your asset accounts are at the top. So you should have all of your Chase accounts. I said Chase, we should have all of your bank accounts. We have a lot of accounts with a lot of different banks. Probably makes managing this a nightmare, but good for examples. So this is related everything with our assets, right? So assets are at the top, cash will always be at the top. Remember, those account numbers matter, right? So in Studio, your chart of accounts, those 1000s have to do with your asset accounts. So test account without code or type. But here's my cash accounts, right? So 1010, 1012, 1013. Those will populate in the top section. This then tells you your total, how much cash do you have on hand. Your next grouping of assets have to do with inventory. So we have quite a bit of inventory here. And then we start getting into something called vendor deposit and client deposit. At least for right now, let's skip over something called a Baker credit. Let's skip over suspense. Suspense should always be zero. We usually do a deep dive on closing out the year. So what do you do in a balance sheet if something like this exists? If there's suspense of $38,000, what does that mean? That means that there's a question, right? But the follow-up is, how do you find that? Accounts receivable is up here as well. So this is how much money do people owe you? But remember, since Studio is accrual, we only recognize revenue in our item screen. We only recognize revenue in this screen, in the item screen, by creating invoices. So by actually selecting items and putting them on an invoice and creating this create invoice button. If you don't ever create invoices in your Studio Designer, you will never have income associated with product. So if we go back to this section, right, anything associated with product should live up here. So if you haven't completed that step, if you haven't completed that item life cycle, this section will be zero. If you're utilizing Studio correctly in terms of income time billing lives under its own module. The time billing module doesn't have a work in progress feature. You cannot add time billing to proposals. You can only add time billing to invoices. So income time billing, as soon as you invoice, will create revenue under the time billing category. Everything else related to items, if clients are paying you All of that money tied to items from clients lives in this report, or lives in this bucket called client deposit. So this at the moment is saying to me, in this database of, I think we're in Robert Stone Consulting, I have $3.5 million of client deposit. I would say there's a couple of secondary reports to then generate from your balance sheet. Your balance sheet summarizes all of these ledgers, but then what, right? How do you dive into that? This is one of the most important. Yes, the credit cards are important too. Yes, I need to know how much money do I have as a liability, whether it be to the SBA for the idle loan, whether it's to a line of credit. But I really want everyone to understand the impact of client deposit. And then on the flip side of vendor deposit, there isn't a report necessarily for vendor deposit. We usually teach our clients that, if your client deposits are in a good place, your vendor deposits are in a good place. If your project worksheets are in a good place, both of these buckets are in a good place. But how do you drill down into that? So if you pull your balance sheet and you're not sure where to find the detail of client deposit, go back to reports, go back to legacy. And in your fourth column over, there's this report, and it's called the client deposit report. So if you click on it, it's a report that says 50/40 client deposit. Again, exclude zeros, but that's just me. And click PDF. And so this report will break down your client deposit by client. And so there's 5 different columns up here. What do they mean, and how important are they? So this report is I would say critical. It's very, very important in terms of financial reports. Income statement, balance sheet, client deposit are definitely the top 3. By client, because Studio is a item-based, client-based software, this is explaining to us how much money has 19th Street paid us in full. So, okay, they've given us $1.1 million. Out of that 1.1 million, they have money on proposal deposits. What does that mean? That means there are all these items in Studio. Let's go find one. Sometimes it's not necessarily that easy. Well, here's an item. So this item is showing that the client paid for in full. This was a bowl out of inventory. It should always be on a proposal before a client pays for it, but order of operations wasn't necessarily followed. But in this scenario, this $4,300 is living in this proposal deposit bucket. The client paid for it, but we didn't invoice it. So that means we didn't recognize revenue and we didn't recognize cost of goods. When your projects are complete and clean, your proposal deposit should be 0 and your funds available should be 0. And everything that the client has paid for you for funds received should live in this invoice payment column. I don't even know if we have an example that fits that criteria in this database. So after understanding what's in proposal deposits, the next bucket to pay attention to is funds available, right? Because this is your liability. This is saying, what is this saying to me in regards to 19th Street? So Mr. Tom Hanks paid us $758,000. We took money from them and we put it in their bucket of funds available. So they have this bucket of money. It's reflected in our cash balances, but it's not revenue, right? It literally is well, it would depend on your contract, but sort of worst case scenario, if the client said to you tomorrow, you know what, I changed my mind. I want my $758,000 back. Funds available is a liability to you. You would, again, let's assume you would be obligated to return to them $758,000. And if you go down to the bottom of your client deposit report, this is telling you how much money clients have paid for you that are on items. And then this is telling you, oh, well, how much money do you have from clients that are in funds available? Now, funds available can be tricky to unravel because firms work in different ways. And you can have funds available that are true retainers that you're billing against. You can have funds available that are retainers that will be used and applied to a final invoice for time billing and or product. So sometimes it's not necessarily what I would call factual to say that we owe $2.5 million. Something that we look at very quickly too is, okay, well, if this is really true money that we can be on the hook for to give back to a client, do we have that in cash? And so this is saying that we do, right? We're relatively healthy in cash. Now, granted, look down here, our liabilities are pretty crazy. But we haven't spent our client deposit money. Somebody had a question related to $500,000 in deposits for furniture and furnishings, but I've only spent 100,000 so far and still have more furniture to buy from them. How can I know my projected profit if we are in the middle of a project? That's a great question. So I would say it depends, and it depends on how you're managing studio, right? So are you utilizing budget items? Are you utilizing budget rooms? If you're utilizing budget items, you should know, right, where you are in terms of actuals versus your budget, which you could then utilize to say, where are you in terms of profit? If you're not, then you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't be able to know what your projected profit on a project is. So hopefully I answered that question. So somebody's asking a question about the profitability report. Is there a way to add the client in the header without using filter showing option? I'm not clear if I know what you're asking. Let's go to profit. Meaning you don't want, so if we go to 19th Street. We're not looking to show the client here. Is there a way to add the client in the header without using filter showing option? I'm apologize. I'm not necessarily sure what that means. If because Studio is item based, so many of the reports are obviously item based, but then items are tied to clients. So a lot of times our project reports, we are filtering by client, right? Because we're trying to understand where the whether it be the project profitability or the project management side, where that is in relation to each individual client and or project. Is there a budget versus actual report? So there is, it will be on the item side. So if you go to if you just go to all reports and you type in budget, you have a plethora of budget reports. They are really great. I know we've done webinars specifically on budgets because there are so many different options. So the budget fields are good. I mean, they are. I mean, I actually love them. So you could do budgets by room, you could do budgets by item. In the item field, here's your budget, low and high. Some of your reports are structured out of the gate to only have, so if you see there's a high low, but for example, the top two are only one of the budget columns, and Studio defers to they default to the low budget versus the high budget if you're only using one. So that's something to keep in mind. I know we're sort of up almost against the hour, so I'm going to try to go through as many questions from the top as I can. I would say we covered some aspects of the most important pieces of your balance sheet and your income statement. Towards the end of the year, there will be more, we'll drill down further in terms of how to clean up your balance sheet, how to clean up your income statement, and really how to utilize some of the subledgers, like a client deposit report, to understand how that relates to your income statement, because they do go hand in hand. So I think I answered the question about how do we make sure that only items that a client has actually purchased show up on those, right? Depends on obviously how you're using the database, but you could add that filter as a net proposal number. You could add the filter as a client total balance. You could add the filter client payment. We talked about entering expenses, and I think that there's quite a few webinars in terms of getting things into your general ledger. Somebody's asking, would this report be inaccurate if you currently do not use Studio Pay? I'm not sure which report you are referring to. Our clients pay via checks and items are being paid via cash account or funds available. However, if we did start using Studio Pay, would this report be more relevant and useful? I'm assuming we're maybe talking about the client deposit report. The client deposit report is not tied directly to Studio Pay, right? Client deposit is tied to your cash receipts. So regardless of how you're taking money in, right, so are we in an item? We're in a negative item, but in your view payment screen on each item, right, this client payment, and then the invoice field determine what lives in client deposit. So regardless of payment type. Somebody is asking, couldn't you select the client from the drop down when entering CC charges and selecting the account there so it shows under the client? I also apologize, I don't know what that is in relation to. In reference to the profitability report, is there a way to add the client in the header without using filter showing? I was trying to understand what that question meant. Because you'd be looking at profitability by client. How do you enter income from previous months that were for time billing? When I enter income, it only counts towards that month. So that's a great question. If you notice when you're in Studio, so remember, Studio's accrual, it's amazing. But when you're in Studio, there isn't a place to enter an accounting date in your item screen. So when you're making invoices, let's find if I can make an invoice out of something. Oh, here's one, blue side table. It's very blue, as you could see by this picture. So this, if I want to invoice this table and I go to create invoice, it'll generate an invoice with today's date. Hopefully it'll populate into our screen. I don't think it did, 300,491. It generates it with the system date. So I'm going to show everyone, and you could obviously, you could Google it, or you could look it up in help as well. So you have a system date under your employee preferences in Studio. So here's our invoice date, 10/9. You can set a different system date for revenue recognition. I will warn you that you playing with this date could be really dangerous. So I went into settings, I went into my employees, and I have all of my users. So I go to find my name, and I go to my edit pencil button, and here's my accounting date. And if you see, there's a little red box next to it, and it says accounting date will pre or post date orders and invoices. Leave the accounting date blank for the current date. So if the date is blank here, it means the system automatically pulls from today's date. Think about how you work, for example, in Money In. In Money In, you pick the GL date, right? You could tell the system, oh, I want to put something in January, I want to put something in February or December. Same with Money Out. When you're in Money Out, the system asks you for a check date. But when you're in your item screen and you're creating invoices, proposals, and in time billing and purchase orders, there is no default date. So this is where it pulls from. So if I change this to 9/30, I can do that. And I go to save and close. And I can now, so you see my little orange error box, or caution box, it's there to let me know that, oh my gosh, I have a system date set. I could now go to items and I could now invoice for 9/30. But remember, again, you could do that, but depending on when you file sales tax, when you file income tax, there can be repercussions to utilizing that date incorrectly. So I would just gently warn you to be very mindful. I'd like to find an item. Here's an item. So it's not been paid for, but that's okay. And it's an antique chair, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to create an invoice. And so when I do that, it generated with a 9/30 date. But that also means it picked up sales tax in a previous period. I'm a monthly filer. It's the 9th. Let's say I already filed my sales tax. I did it on the 2nd of October. because I had time and I had the cash. It generated revenue in September. And so now, just again, as an example, my sales tax is incorrect. And my gross revenue doesn't tie for my sales tax reporting period as well. So that's the way to change it. And then to revert it back, go to settings and my employees and your name and clear this out and save and close. And now the orange box or the orange triangle goes away. And now your date is reverted back to normal. So it can be useful, but again, just be careful. I think that about wraps it up. We're pretty much at the top of the hour. I know there were a lot of questions. I know there's a lot to cover. We'll be back in 2 weeks. It will be, I don't remember the topic. I don't know if Anthony, you do, but
Do actually, that will be my tax deductions and strategy
oh,
key insights for design firms. So my tax deductions and strategies. I like the sound of that one, to be
oh, I
honest.
do too. You teach it and I'll join.
Oh dear Lord, we're not going to get anywhere.
But that is, I mean, that is a good one, and that's a proactive one for end of the year, actually, too. So,
Yeah, definitely.
um, but I know there's a lot to get into. I know that I do think it can, one question could lead to another, could lead to another, could lead to another. So I know some of the questions I didn't necessarily answer because I tried really hard to stay on topic. So if you need any one of us, meaning both Anthony and myself, just reach out.
Absolutely. And with that being said, you can reach Julia at newagefinancialconsulting.com. There's also her contact information with phone and their website. And then if you want to get into, if you want to contact support and reach out to Studio Designer, you can do that the quickest way, which is why I have this as a viable option on our slide here. Our chat assistant is powered by none other than ChatGPT, which is amazing. It scans our entire knowledge base. We are constantly feeding this data and information so it becomes smarter and smarter. And you all also help with that when you interact with our chat assistant. So if you want to do that, that's the quickest way to get a response. If not, it creates a case for us to reach out to you later and follow up to make sure you have everything that you need. Obviously, support at studiodesigner.com is how you can also generate a case for us to reach out to you as well. But other than that, we thank you for joining us today. Again, dedicating time out of your busy day to hang out with us for an hour. Julia, thank you. It's good to be back with you. Looking forward to the rest of these webinars in this series for year end. And with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.